Hello, sitting by the creek again today. Nice peaceful space. Today I want to get a little bit more intimate. I've been dealing with a lot of my trauma lately. Spent a long time hiding from my trauma, being unaware of my trauma. A long time not knowing what to do about it. I still don't know what to do about it, but I stopped running from it. I stopped running from it, and now I just feel it all. Feel it all. And I use a very simple definition for trauma. I consider trauma to be any emotions that are not processed. One interesting aspect of health for a human being is that we are beings of motion. Things have to be moving in us and out of us and through us. And if they're not moving, if they're stagnant or they're stuck, then disease occurs. And on a very practical physical level, the most obvious example of this is digestive issues, right? If you're eating food and it's not being digested and eliminated properly, that's called constipation. And anyone who's ever experienced constipation will tell you that's not a pleasant experience, right? It's obviously a major issue in our culture. We sell a lot of laxatives. The same principle is true on many other levels, on an energetic level. This is what things like Qigong and acupuncture and Reiki are doing, is they are finding the places in your energy system where the movement is stuck and opening it up to flow again. When you exercise or you do saunas, you're opening up the circulatory system and increasing blood flow and lymphatic movement. Right? If you sit down all day, the lymph gets stagnant and the blood does not move freely. And on a mental level, if we take in all this information, like so many of us are doing with this content, but never take the time to get silent, to get quiet, and to allow those thoughts and those things to shift into place and find their equilibrium, then we can start to get overwhelmed and confused and feel a little crazy. And on an emotional level, we're taking in all of our experiences, the emotional aspect of all of our experiences, and we have to process them. We have to come to peace with them, come to accept them. And if there is no acceptance, then this has not been processed, and it's the equivalent of emotional constipation. I think a lot of us have emotional constipation these days. I think that's just another name for trauma. I've been thinking about trauma a lot lately, and I've been thinking about our society and how everyone seems to be going a little crazy. And the other day, this theory came to me, this idea that I'd like to run by you. And the idea is that this generation and the generation before it, and possibly even the generation before that, but definitely millennials and baby boomers and everyone around that time, specifically people born in the 80s and 90s, we are often some of the first people of a long lineage of ancestors who were in survival mode for a long time. 20th century was a very difficult time. It was a very difficult time. The 19th century was a very difficult time. People have just been struggling in survival mode for a long time. And we've made enough progress that many of us have broken through that. We've broken through, and our parents and our grandparents were able to create a scenario for us where we're out of that survival desperation state. And there's a certain privilege, you might say, to being able to work on your trauma at all. Certain luxury. Being able to look at your trauma and work on it means that you have food on the table. You know what I mean? And so suddenly we're at a moment in history where many of us have sort of looked around and looked within. And for the first time in generations, we're not being propelled forward by survival forces. We have enough leeway, enough room to look within, and to look around. And that's not to say that our current situations aren't hard. They're still very hard. But there's just enough wiggle room, just enough advantage, just enough privilege to look at our stuff and to look in and say, holy shit, I've got a lot of trauma. And I don't think all of this is mine. Where did this come from? And you start to realize, like, oh, this is my parents' shit. This is my grandparents' shit. This is my neighbor's shit. This is my country's shit. This is all this stuff that's been building up in the closet for generations that we haven't been processing. And now we're seeing it in ourselves and seeing that we're holding on to this. And we look around, right? We look within and we see this trauma. We're like, oh my gosh, what do I do with this? A lot of this isn't mine. I don't know how to process this. And we look around and we see that the world is in chaos. That this striving for survival that has been done for a couple centuries now has led to the building of a beautiful civilization. But that beautiful civilization is built on a house of cards. It's built on principles that are not in alignment with nature. It is built on principles that continues to create more trauma within ourselves and within the larger community of life. And we're dependent on this system, and many of us are starting to see it and to feel it and say, this doesn't feel good, this isn't right, I don't want to do this. Well, what's the other option? I gotta eat. I have enough leeway that I can stop and ask these questions, but I don't have enough leeway that I can clearly get out of this situation. It almost feels like we have to be a part of the problem just to survive. I have to go get a job that's built on industrial practices, that is robbing the earth of resources, and, I can't even go out to eat. It's like I tried to just go get some awesome Mexican food a couple days ago, and there was carryout. Right, this carryout of this food meant that there was like 3 things of plastic and styrofoam and aluminum foil and all this stuff just so I could have some fajitas. So just like one meal had to have all of this baggage attached to it. And what about the agricultural practices that produced that one meal? They weren't sustainable. They weren't ethical. They were producing trauma. They were producing trauma to the land. They were producing trauma in the form of monocropping. You know what monocropping it is? It's when you take an ecosystem and you bulldoze it down and you use it to grow one plant or raise one animal. This is not how nature works. There was trauma in the form of the workers. Many of those people working those fields were not in good conditions, and it would not be something that those of us with this advantage to be able to look around and see what's wrong, we would not be comfortable doing those things, but yet we still depend on others doing those things. The styrofoam that this came in, not only is it catastrophic for the environment, this is a huge trauma for the environment, just that this styrofoam even exists. The fact that it exists, unless we're going to launch it to the moon or something, which even then we're using a bunch of fuel to get it there, now that it exists, it is a problem. Like every plastic utensil you ever bought still exists. Every styrofoam container that you were ever given at any take-up point, at any point in your life, it still exists. It's still on the planet, and nature's still traumatized by it, trying to figure out what the hell to do with it. And that styrofoam container was probably made overseas by someone in terrible, terrible work conditions at a factory that was probably polluting a local water system, that was affecting local communities. And there are so many people waking up to this. You know, we do have that advantage, that luxury of not being in full survival mode enough that we can look at this scenario and question it. But we also have the internet. And so it's been this massive, just tidal wave of awareness and emotional reactions to that awareness, and all of the information is getting swirled up in this cyberspace, and it's getting exaggerated, and it's getting denied, and it's getting amplified, and it's getting it's getting all mixed up to the point where we don't even know what's true anymore, but we know something's terribly wrong. It's like I can't even pinpoint exactly what's wrong, and I certainly can't pinpoint how to fix it. But I know, every cell in my body knows that something's terribly wrong. And so many of us are in this situation right now. And you can spin your head around it all day long, and it doesn't do anything. You just end up exhausted and emotional and traumatized by the experience of trying to figure out all this trauma. And the one thing I come back to over and over again is just nature. You know? Like, we as a people have a moment. We have a moment in time right now where our head has come out of the sand and we're looking around. And we have the potential to change things, to make real substantial change in the world. But we don't really know how to do it. We don't know how to do it in a way that is in alignment with our values. We don't know how to do it in a way that doesn't add to the problem, doesn't have unintended consequences. And a lot of us in that state of not knowing how to do it, of not knowing how to work through our trauma inside and to work outside in a way that is healing for ourselves and others. Many of us don't know the path of healing, the medicine path. We don't have that path that takes us all back to wholeness. And we look to our institutions, and we look to our leaders, and we sometimes we trust them, and then we suffer the consequences, and then we realize they don't know either. They don't know either. So many people in the self-health world are realizing this when they try to go to the medical system. I have a lot of experience going to the medical system and being extremely disappointed, putting my trust in someone who had the qualifications and then experienced suffering as a result. And then I have the experience of going, oh, let's go to the alternative health world and let's talk to them. They must know what's going on. And so I put my trust in them, and I experienced suffering because they don't know either. And so in an attempt to help myself and to help others, I've created more trauma for myself over and over again, and probably more trauma for other people too. A lot of people are doing that because a lot of people are looking at this, and because they're afraid, and because they haven't worked through their own stuff, and because they don't have a clear path, and doesn't seem like anyone they can trust, and it seems like all their institutions and all of their leaders have failed them, they resort to anger. They resort to depression. They resort to lashing out. There's a lot of lashing out happening right now. A lot of lashing out happening right now. A lot of angry people screaming in the streets, but there's just as many depressed, angry people who have decided to go in and just deal with it as through isolation and hopelessness. You know, There's people who are dealing with hopelessness. There's people who are dealing with it by lashing out and trying to blame people, trying to get revenge. There's a lot of that happening right now. I've done that in my life. I've been there. It's been a long time in both of those places. It's been a long time in both of those places. And none of it worked. At the end of the day, I'm still here with my trauma, with my health problems, with my financial challenges, with this system that is inherently broken, and I have no idea what to do about it. And I just want to encourage anyone who's hearing this, anyone who's really hearing what I'm saying, who's really feeling the truth of it in their body, who's receiving it. You are the healers. We are the healers. And we have to step up into that role, because keeping our head down and doing the same thing we've been doing isn't going to work. Isolating ourselves in hopelessness and depression isn't going to work. Handing over our power to authority figures, traditional or non-traditional, isn't going to work. Lashing out at other people, whether it's in YouTube comment sections or protests, that's not going to work either. We have to find the medicine path. We have to find the healing path. And if this makes sense to you, if everything that I'm saying right now makes sense to you, then you're part of the team. You're one of the ones that's going to help figure this out. And we got to do the self-work. We got to do the self-work. Because we don't do the self-work, then we hand out over our power. We succumb to our hopelessness, or we lash out at others. All of which creates more trauma. All of which creates more of the problem. And it's scary to acknowledge that we don't know the path. It's very scary. There's a few things I know for sure. A few things that I'm willing that I'm so confident I'm willing to teach them as I continue to learn the rest of the details. It comes down to two main truths. One, work on yourself. Work on your physical body, work on your diet, find a way to make money that's meaningful to you and minimizes the negative impact on the world. Find a way to eat food that heals your body, nourishes your body, and minimizes the negative impact on the world. Find a way to work through your emotional trauma and the emotional trauma of all your ancestors that you inherited. Figure out a way to work on that. Because all of life depends on it. The next 7 generations depend on it. Right? We really got to start thinking about that in our world again. Because how many more generations can we hand this down to? I don't think there's anything productive about blaming things on other people. We can look at the past all we want. It doesn't make a difference. Because the future is uncharted territory. It's unlike anything we've ever seen. We got to do that self-work on ourselves so that we can navigate the storm, because it's getting worse, right? This is just the beginning. And I think a lot of you know that. A lot of you know that this is just the beginning. So work on yourself. Learn to heal as much of that trauma as you can. Learn to live off the land as much as you can. Learn to be solid within your energy as much as you can, so that you're not putting the burden on others, so that when things get really crazy, you could stand up under the weight of that and be a beacon of light for all those who are lost. And that's number two. Number two thing that I'm certain of is that there is a light. There is a guidance. And it's found in nature, right? Nature is the creator, and the creation one and the same. It is the light. It is the answer. Find harmony with nature. Connect with nature. And you'll remember who you are, and you'll know what you need to do. Connect with nature, return to nature, and the trauma will heal inside and around us. So much of this trauma comes from a lifestyle, a life way that is separate from nature, the belief that we can dominate nature, that separates us, that we can separate ourselves from nature and live apart from it. You are not apart from nature. This is your home. This is your home. Not that cookie cutter house you live in the suburbs. Not that noisy apartment in the city you live in. That's not your home. This is your home. The dirt, this is your home. This is where you come from. Go back there. Remember who you are. Work on that trauma within. Find ways to incorporate the ancient wisdoms that we lost about how to live in harmony with nature. Forage, grow your own food, practice permaculture. There's new ways that we're living in harmony with nature. Pursue those, Do the inner work so you can find that inner voice to guide you. Go into nature so you can heal that trauma, so you can find the guide within and all around you. Because it's there and it's supporting you. And balance is going to be restored. And it's gonna be messy along the way. And we can be a force that creates more chaos, or we can be a force that is on the side of harmony. Create that harmony within. Figure out how to reharmonize your life with nature. Those are the only two things I know for sure. I guess it's three things, right? Harmonize within, harmonize with nature, and find your guidance. Whatever that is for you, find your guide, inside, outside. Stand tall under the weight of your life and your challenges. Accept the traumas that have occurred and allow the healing to happen. Allow those emotions to move through. Allow that energy to move through. Allow the air to move in and out. Create movement in your life again. Create movement forward. And the answers will reveal themselves to you when you need them. Do not allow the fear of the unknown to stop you. Do not allow your conditioning from society to tell you that whatever path you're taking is the wrong path. If it is your path, it's not the wrong path. And for all of those out there who are searching for the medicine, who are searching for that healing life way, know that you're not alone. Know that there are millions like you, millions who are lost and scared and looking for answers. I'm going to keep looking for answers. And I'm going to keep sharing them with you on this channel. Thank you.